Welcome to Twilight Garage. David Rogerson here. We're going to be delving into sex, drugs, rock and roll, and all things counterculture here on Twilight Garage each week. With my co-host, the great Casey Fields, we're going to be joined by a bevy of experts in each of our subjects. Currently, we're dealing with all things Manson, and we have the great Deb Silva as a regular expert and contributor. Thank you so much for your subscriptions and your support. We are here for you. We are doing this for free out of the love of the expression of this case and keeping things fair and fun.
The Twilight Garage podcast is brought to you by The Red Onion, the Bay Area's finest hamburgers, located at 11900 San Pablo Avenue in El Chorrito. Tell them Twilight Garage sent you.
Twilighters! So flattered and just filled with love that you're here joining us again. Casey, wow, do you have any words for how nicely this is going? Just how Twilight Garage is feeling right now?
So much love and appreciation for you guys. You've all been so welcoming and just so many amazing words of encouragement we received and online. And
absolutely.
Just love
and
you guys.
You know what's really feeling good? Before I got the ball rolling with Casey, because I'd been wanting to do a broadcast that could maybe bring justice to some of these subjects. And when I spoke to you, I knew we had a lot of the same feelings, a lot of the protectiveness of some of these subjects. And it's incredible that we set out to do things in a more community-based way, that it was more about y'all, that it was more about the subjects, trying to be sensitive to the victims and not make it about you and I or any preconceived ideas of who we were. And good night if people haven't just been so kind. Paul over there, the PCast, sent the PCasters over here. And let me say to you, the way that started out with peace and love and all this reconciliation within the community was really good. Mm-hmm. So for him to give us the green light on that and acknowledge, a lot of the difficulties it takes to make a broadcast and bring things together. We've seen other broadcasts come and go, TLB popping on and off.
Man, we're blessed. I never would thought of doing a podcast, but it came together with this team, right? You and Alex.
As soon as we started talking.
Yep.
We were so blessed, Alex. You've been such a good friend of mine for the past few years, our children hanging out and our wives being close. But this thing's just been amazing because I didn't have anyone to talk to about this case. And it puts a weird pressure on things and this subject, because when you have survivors still in the world and such a really driving, passionate community base of fans who are interested in your subject, for you to be on the loose, it's a thing. There's a lot of pressure.
The community just continues to grow. More eyes become on this case, the more documentaries and books that come out, but we're all growing in it together, right?
Absolutely.
I'm learning from you. You're learning from me. We're learning from our viewers. I mean, it's beautiful.
Humbly. And I really hope that this is what's driving a lot of this goodness, is that maybe contrary to the way I come off publicly, I hope that I'm humble. I'm very grateful for any type of feedback, any research corrections, directions of things we can learn about, because to know that our dear friend Deb Silva had Hendrickson himself when he was putting out the book Death to Pigs, when he was putting out the Manson gang, inside the Manson gang videos. He was an active participant.
Absolutely.
Wow.
A regular on the blog.
Good Lord. And then that's why you see people come in who are newer, like myself and other people, and we're excited and we find ourselves in the middle of the information, but man, their depth of knowledge is incredible. And so we really thank you all who came before us and are so glad that you're excited about what we're doing. But we do encourage you, please send us links to these previous discussions, even in the Manson blog, even if it doesn't seem like that long ago. Please, let's get these conversations stoked again, because some of these things that are 15 years old on the Manson blog are even more valid now.
And I really want to highlight Deb's work. I mean, she'll put a week or two into every single post that she puts up.
Absolutely.
And so be on the lookout every Sunday night at midnight, going into Monday morning. There's a new blog entry on mansonblog.com, and it's free.
And we just cannot thank her enough or overstate her incredible bedrock status within this research community. Because, you know, it just bears repeating. All roads lead to Deb. So we put her on Front Street. We're not like some of these other people who want to make it seem like it's about us, because I feel like a babe in the woods. I'm a uniter, not a divider, but thank you. And then this brings us to something we've been discussing. So it's so nice to have the freedom to bring some of these things out. And you've been talking a lot about Ivan Pugh, and I find him really fascinating, but hard to talk about, because I would never want to blow someone's anonymity or take their incredible personal story. And I don't know, it just seems very ghoulish and like take somebody's personal life apart and lust over it. But if you look at things in the term of history and these longer viewpoints, things become less personal, and those feelings somehow feel like they can be worked through to get the means to the end, which is documenting history and these various individuals like Sandra Good and our friend we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, today we're going to talk a lot about Bobby Beausoleil, and some of the information that I'm going to be going through is actually comes from a Deb article on Manson blog from 2018. And so yeah, let's jump right in.
Please.
So November 1948, actually just a month or two after my dad was born, Bobby Beausoleil was born, and he grew up there in Santa Barbara, California, one of the most beautiful places in the world. Bobby said that his childhood growing up in Santa Barbara was like living in the American Riviera. What about you? Have you spent any time down there?
A great deal of time. I have some really, really close friends down there. My buddy Andrew Cornelius, one of them, he's a great tattooer. We spend a lot of time down there on our bicycles. It's one of my favorite destinations. I love to run the Land Cruiser down there with my bicycle, stay with people like Andrew, ride my bike around, enjoy the Spanish Fiesta days. We've been doing that most every single year for about the past 15, 16 years. It's just wonderful down there. And there's so much history with him and so many intersections of stories with him and Santa Barbara. So it's cool that he was born there. And maybe that's where some of his beautiful persona came from, that whole laid back, ultra cool thing.
There's a much different dynamic to Santa Barbara than there is Los Angeles, right?
Absolutely.
It's further enough away from the city of Los Angeles to where it has its own culture, laid back vibe, just very different. So a lot of the celebrities and actors that were really heavy participating in LA at that time, they lived on the outside, right? Because they wanted to be kind of away from
second homes.
Yeah,
second homes, of course, Reagan, of course, being the most famous. And there was a soap opera even in the 80s, Santa Barbara. But it's a wonderful place. A lot of natural adobe, just beautiful whitewash with beautiful Spanish tile roofs. Very idealistic. I could see him, wearing a nice sun hat and some loose breeches. And it's a very idyllic picture. So then he moved along and he was very naturally charismatic.
They had a bunch of, him and his parents lived in a few homes. I think like 3 or 4 homes in Santa Barbara. They bounced about. I think dad was smart and kept upgrading every time.
They lived on Bath Street, which is a one-way busy street. They moved over to some other more residential neighborhoods without quite the traffic issues. And it's very dependent on where you live in Santa Barbara as to how much of the Santa Barbara experience you're going to be entitled to.
So dad worked at Arden Farms, which was a dairy company. They provided milk throughout Southern California. Huge company. Then he later got a second job at a Mesa liquor store right there in downtown. But when Bobby was 8, he started to really get into music, and he created his own custom percussion instrument, right, that he called jazz band. And I don't know if you did this when you were a kid. I did it, but you kind of just like throw some stuff together, some glass and different things that makes sounds, right? Bang on different types of metal, But he got really good with the percussion, and it's really what built his love for music.
So it was an easy way in for him physically to become a musician. It was percussion, and then it evolved into these other instruments of what he's more known for now.
And then he had some younger brothers, and they all shared a room together. Well, at the age of 9, he actually decided, I need a little bit more independence, right? He moved into the family's garage, and this allowed him to move more freely in and out of the house.
Because you got the little side door in the garage, right?
And they were living not too far away from the beach. So he talks about he loved to go walk his dog down to the beach. And a lot of his friends, they were surfers and stuff, and they didn't really have the kind of extra money for him to be able to buy a surfboard. But he was just a chill guy who just had a good time hanging out and, walking the beach. And
well, that's how it became fluent in girls. If you've got a dog on the beach, you've got a nice conversation, and it's a nice way to slow things up with the other sex.
So he told Truman Capote in an interview, he said, when I was 11 years old, I got my first guitar. I found it in my grandmother's attic and taught myself to play it. I've been nuts about music ever since.
Yeah. See, it's incredible. The things that appear to be quite trivial in the moment.
So David's graced us with a few of his nice battle axes right here. If you guys can see, hopefully.
Yeah, these were all custom made for me by a very close friend of mine. His name is Brian Thrasher. He is a senior master builder at Fender Guitars. This is one of the lightest Telecasters in the world. It's like half the weight. He made that for me. It's a nice prototype. And then this was, his high school instrument that translated into this really nice instrument that he gave to me when I was going through a really hard time in my life. It's incredible what a guitar can do for you. And I know Bobby's owned some pieces throughout the years that similarly, if you play a guitar, there's a couple of them that'll really become quite close to you. And he had some, didn't he?
Yeah. So I think when he was 11, he was rummaging around in his grandmother's attic, and he found a guitar, and that was the first one that he ever really owned,
Right.
Yeah.
But he got a Les Paul later, right?
Yeah. Later, we'll get to that. So he would spend summers down at his grandmother's house. She lived down in, I guess the proper pronunciation is El Monte.
Yeah.
But, a lot of folks down there, we say El Monte, we actually drop the T. That's actually kind of common in California, right?
Right.
We don't say Santa Barbara. We say Santa Barbara or Santa Ana. You know, it's kind of a California linguistic thing.
Oh, it really is,
Yeah.
for sure.
We
live
don't
right
say
near
Monterey. We say Monterey, you know.
well, there's El Sobrante is the next town over, and we call it El Sobrante.
So it's just kind of a funny thing. So Bobby, yeah, down in El Monte, he grew up a group of friends when he, you know, hanging out at his grandmother's house. He had what he called some ghetto whites, and he also some of his Hispanic friends, you know. So
that's what was out there at that point.
Yep.
A good friend of mine, Jeff, grew up out in that area as well. It's like I just remember the cactus out there, and you're right up against Rancho Cucamonga.
So yeah, San Gabriel Valley. I spent a lot of time out there when I was in college. It's a really family community.
Yeah,
just on the outside of East LA. It wouldn't be considered East LA, but it's not too far away, really.
No, it's the outer LA basin as it turns into kind of the San Bernardino Valley. Because there's a little trough. It's almost like an arroyo. And then it kind of turns into, for lack of a better term, an escarpment there at San Bernardino. Now, Bobby, man, what a character. What a beautiful boy. So how old was he at this point?
So around 13, 14, he's hanging out with his homeboy. His own friend's dad owned a gas station there in El Monte.
Oh, cool.
Right. So they used to sit around hanging out in the old cars that were broken down in the lot, playing the guitar. Just having a good time, man. So when it was time for the school year to start back up, his parents wanted him to come back to Santa Barbara, and he just wasn't feeling it. And he said, you know, grandma has cancer. I think I would like to stay down here and take care of her. And it was more of an opportunity for him to get in some more trouble, you know?
Well, for sure. I did a little bit of that. I got, I don't know, handed off to different people when I was a kid. My older brother was, he was a really nice kid. He had his act together and people loved him and he would have a solid spot, but me, not so much. Mm-hmm. And so when I would find a comfortable little spot like that, generally there was trouble there, but there was love for me. So, you know, I'm guessing his friends were real cool to him. I also hung out at a gas station a lot when I was a kid, and man, that was the spot. You could, you know, there's all those tires, there's rough housing, you've got tools. If you ride a bicycle, you're good. If you ride a motorcycle, you're good. It doesn't matter. If it's got wheels on it, you're straight. There's going to be a social element because everybody has to come get gas. So sooner or later, and if you've got cold pops there, forget it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing right there.
It was for me anyway. I really enjoyed it out in Ridgecrest. I hung out. There was a couple different Chevron stations that I hung out at, and they were a lot of fun for me.
So Bobby, he was just doing little stuff, getting in trouble, right, for hitchhiking, for a little bit of vandalism. You know, a few episodes during the Christmas time, I told that story about them stealing the decorations off the front lawn, right,
and putting them on the side of the van.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So eventually, this kind of caught up to him, and he got sent to juvie, right? And they told him you're going to be in there for a year. Well, they actually put him in this kind of cool program. It was working with the forestry service as like fire cadets. And so he was serving out the rest of his time while also making some money. And so there would be situations where they would clean up after fires, or planes would drop seed on the forest and they would spread the seed, stuff like that. But during that time, he was able to save like $300, I believe. And with it, he bought this beautiful Les Paul SG signature guitar.
Oh, that's when he did it. Yeah. Because that's what the thing was, that particular guitar. Now, what year was the thing?
This was, I believe, 1963. And I think that he spent $269. And the most recently I saw that guitar was going for about 10 grand nowadays.
Well, that's a really good deal, because I'm guessing it's around a 61. And if you've got a 61 Les Paul SG, what that is, it's a double cutaway. So it looks like the Angus Young AC/DC guitar. But a lot of those, like if you get them in white, especially if they're a hardtail. Right around there, they're really, really nice.
White looks clean, man.
I've had a few of those, and mine were all white. It's either that or the TV yellow is a really nice color too. But those are incredible guitars. They're really lightweight. They resonate really nicely. Pickups are perfectly attenuated. You got to be really careful. You can snap the headstock off them really easy. But so he had a very fine instrument at a pretty young age.
It was a great job for him. It was very physical. I mean, they put him through like a boot camp. He shaved his head. He learned some discipline, you know. And also another cool part of it is they had a glee club, and that's where he really got into singing and gained some confidence with his voice. So
Cool.
by the time that he got out, I mean, he was raring to go. Like, he really wanted to get in a band, and he said, "Mom and Dad, I'm just not feeling it here in Santa Barbara. I want to get back down to El Monte, right? That's where my friends are." So he made his way back down there. And at the age of 16, he just started joining these bands. And he gained this nickname, Cupid.
Because he was such a
so good
man.
with the ladies, right?
So if we do the math on that, this is 63, 64.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, so if you think about that time period, right then in that town of El Monte, there was a Veterans Memorial Hall. It was the epicenter in Southern California of doo-wop music, okay? And it was hosted by this man, Arthur Art LeBeau. And there was a bunch of different bands in there. The Penguins were among them. Earth Angel, all those different bands. Frank Zappa was a big doo-wop guy. He had a doo-wop band, played there at the Veterans Memorial Hall.
I love it that you brought that up, because they say that Beausoleil actually played in the background on one of Zappa's releases.
Exactly, because he came from El Monte, seen in this whole doo-wop world, driving all the way in where we talked about last episode about what a bummer it is in the Antelope Valley. If you're passing through there and you're not legit, it's real easy to get caught because it's these concrete arroyos and it's just the freeway. That's all it is. So they can drop in and bust you. But that's at Courts Hill, where Frank Zappa was from, because his father was working, as a lot of our parents were, in the defense industry at that time. So Veterans Hall, if you guys have some time, a lot of beautiful music came out of there, leading into a lot of soul, a lot of epic soul music came out of the doo-wop scene. Incredible music. Art LeBeau. But
being a good-looking young, kid.
I know he was down there working
right?
the dances.
People, he was meeting people in Hollywood.
Big time. He
got cast as an extra in this documentary film, very well known, called Mondo Hollywood, right? And it's interesting because Jay Sebring was also in that film,
right,
around that time. And around the time he was in El Monte, Stephen Parent, another victim, lived in El Monte, grew up there. So,
and that's why this case just won't stop. It's so fascinating, all the wrinkles and the potential relationships, and then the corrections that are made, because we have all these assumptions about these people, and then when you hear the real story later, if you get the chance, oh wow.
So in fall of 1965, he and his dog Snow Fox, a little white dog, moved up to San Francisco, right? And they were kind of checking out. This is pre-Summer of Love. Summer of Love was 1966 and 1967, but he's up there right before all of that. And he's joining some bands, really getting into the music scene, trying to build a career for himself. And at one of these concerts, allegedly, that's when he met Kenneth Anger. And so Kenneth Anger said,
much made of their relationship.
So Kenneth saw this young, good-looking guy, probably grew some kind of crush on him or whatever.
Stop. Not Kenneth Anger.
Hey, man, I got some great opportunities for you.
Is your name Beausoleil? Like, man of the sun, like stud of the sun. Is that what that means in French? Like, hubba hubba.
So eventually, their relationship built, and Bobby moved in with him. But
Ooh,
before we, get to that, I want to,
hold up. I got it.
yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about his time in some of these other bands, including The Outfit.
Now, can we talk about
yeah.
stylistically? As you name them off,
please.
would you lay down stylistically
I'm not
your
too
understanding
familiar.
of
I'm
them?
not really a music guy,
Okay.
so I can't tell you. I could just tell you the names.
And I'll do an interpretive
Yeah.
dance for each band name.
And then in 1967 is when Anger really put Beausoleil to work in some of his productions by the name of Lucifer Rising. You have the Equinox of the Gods, the Invocation of My Demon Barber. So, and around this time, Beausoleil also met, interesting enough, one of the Zodiac killer suspects, a guy named Earl Van Best Jr., who actually Netflix did a documentary on. His son believes that his dad might have been either the Zodiac or one of the Zodiacs.
Now, could you say the name clearly again?
Yep. Earl Van Best Jr. He was a guy that was a musician up in San Francisco, and he actually auditioned to play in Beausoleil's band, the Orchestra.
Now, the reason why I wanted you to say that nice and clear again was that dude sounds guilty as shit. Sorry, you got a name like that, bro? Cuff his ass up until further notice. Like, we're going to have some serious extenuating circumstances for that motherfucker not to be guilty with that name. Dude, if your son is pointing the finger at you,
Mm-hmm.
Come on, bro. And he doesn't have a book like ready to go. Like, come on.
Well, maybe at some point we'll do like a whole show on
Oh,
that.
he's
you know,
guilty.
Yeah. Deb and I have both studied that case quite a bit as well.
Well, so many people tried to put so many pieces together with that case that there's been various people in the Manson story or ancillary figures who have been fingered for that case,
Absolutely, yeah. Primarily Bruce Davis. Yeah,
most famously.
He's been accused quite a few times of being the Zodiac.
And he just seems like a really cool dude. Him to be put into a violent situation, I think it would have to be like a righteous fear, or there'd be a logic behind it. He doesn't seem like a thrill.
Yeah,
killer.
I really don't think he was, because he was in England a few times during a few of those murders. So he couldn't have been, kind of been done. Now, personally, I believe that Zodiac might have been a series of murders done by multiple individuals that were unconnected. I think that the letter writers were probably the same person, and as well as the ciphers. But when it comes to actual murders, I think that they were pretty unrelated. So
interesting. We'll get into that in a further episode.
But around this period in April of 67, Beausoleil met Catherine Scher, Gypsy. So, and I'm kind of confused. I don't know if they met in San Francisco, because she had her own music career going on up there.
She did. And, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about it. We were speaking on the wonders of YouTube, because I'd always heard about that record, but finding it, going through the hassle, remembering to look for it when you're, pile picking, it's not a thing you think of. But her name was Charity
Shane.
And it was a passable song, almost like well, Billy Joe jumped off the tent.
Very poppy, right? For that era.
Tallahatchie Bridge or whatever. It was very much of its time. And she was, wasn't my flavor at that time. She had kind of the mustache going. She was a little rural for my taste, but boy, her and Nancy Pittman have really looked like life has been real good to them. It's nice to see.
They're very pretty ladies.
Doesn't matter how you feel about the case or whatever, or how they relate to the other ladies, or how they speak on Charlie now. When you see survivors who are in good health, I don't know, it just makes me happy. It does.
Now, it's also possible that that Gypsy and Bobby met in LA because they were in this film production together.
Ramrodder. Hell yeah. Well, I relate to that because, again, not to spin everything back to wonderful. Me. But my thing was I loved girls. Anything about a girl, touching you, talking to you, hanging out. Well, I had a teepee in my room. And I guess I used to play this little game, Bad Little Indian. And I can relate. So Ramrodder to me, it was such a self-deprecating, funny thing because I was so kitschy and weird and goofy and corny. As a young person, I was so self-conscious and strange, yet I couldn't get enough of women. So I figured out this way to somehow sneak my way into these girls' realities that wasn't offensive and have fun with it. So watching that movie,
it's very soft core, right?
I'm so guilty. I'm such a kook. Like watching that movie, I laughed at myself. Like DR, like he. It was so embarrassing to watch. Not for them, for myself. But yeah, dude, what a funny, cute thing. And again, the wonders of YouTube. You can listen to Charity Shane. And you can watch the same woman in a different career be a soft, poor corn actress.
It's crazy because that means her Charity Shane songs are very poppy, kind of cute,
right down the middle,
very reminiscent of that era.
Exactly.
But then she was this knockout, gorgeous body. I mean, not really my flavor when it came to the up here, but
that's what I'm saying. We all have our thing.
Exactly.
As much as we love this case, I have to really make fun of all of us because it's, when you're a Beatles fan, right? Everyone's got their favorite Beatle. And it was like when I first met George, we were talking, we had to have this discussion like, okay, we're sensitive men. We don't objectify women, but we had to laugh and just agree that we had our favorite girl, right? It's like being a Beatles fan. And I pointed at George. I'm like, God damn it. I know you're a fucking George fan, George. You love George Harrison, don't you? And he was like, guilty as charged. And I didn't have to ask who his favorite girl was because you want to talk about forget a home run, dude. George Stimson, Beeson Hall Press, publisher of dear friend, our favorite book, Reflections. George Stimson, straight to the grand slam. And it's out of the park, folks. George Stimson. But we made a joke about that. So on this program, y'all, we're not like these Facebook group dudes who are like, let me tell you, I did one over to Brian Wilson's house, stole some money, and got Susan Adkins' tooth fixed. Why does it got to be the bicuspid? Because they all look like Bugs Bunny when they smile because they had that one out. Mm-hmm. Her and Sandra both, right? Had the Bugs
I never
Bunny.
noticed Sandra's.
Oh, yeah, dude. Yeah. Like, she looks really great. And then there's that one picture where she's like, and I kind of wish the internet would have let that one kind of.
Well, it's weird because women peak at different times, right? So some of these girls, they reach their peak when they were 18, 20 years old. Whereas I think like Gypsy and Nancy Pittman, they've just gotten more beautiful as if they gotten older.
Well, we're different blooming cycles. And that's the thing. Like, again, we're not objectifying these women or bringing them down a peg because our penises decide everything in this world. We're going to judge you, woman. I saw some pictures of Red recently where she was in her 50s and her hair had just started to go white, but it still had the streaks of red in it. And she was, had some color and was sitting on her boyfriend's bike at the time. My goodness. And it was just like, to see these women and to have affection for them and to see them have a life beyond this tragedy. Because if it wasn't for all of the tragedy that the victims and their families And our society went through as a whole from these murders. If they hadn't happened, we wouldn't know these people and have this affection. We wouldn't have this community. I wouldn't be having some really nice changes happening in my heart because of the friendships that are happening because of this. And so to have it built on these tragedies is the strangest thing.
Yeah.
And then so like to have somebody like Bobby, who's, you see him and he's kind of sunshine and light, right? Didn't he seem
absolutely
very like zippity doodah? You know what I mean? He seemed very,
1 minute he's got these
Bluebirdy
beautiful girls
on the shoulder.
Yeah, and then next he's living with Kenneth Anger, which is a creepy ass dude.
What was like the whole thing with the attraction to the LeVay thing?
Yeah, Nick has told me that the Xena grew up hearing stories about Bobby Beausoleil from her godfather, Kenneth Anger.
Right. But like the whole Church of Satan thing, like what in the actual, bro? Like, that to me will never make one iota of sense.
So Bobby had a real girlfriend at the time, Gail Massman, which oftentimes people refer to as his wife. They were never actually married. Now, Gail lives about 5 minutes from here, ironically. And they had a daughter together named Zinda, who I'd really like to meet one day. This is the half sister of Ivan Pugh. But so around this time, Bobby was also hanging out with Gypsy and Gail, right? And they came one day in San Francisco, they came across Leslie Van Houten, who had just broken up with her boyfriend, basically was becoming homeless, moved out of the apartment. And they said, hey, why don't you jump in the van with us? We're taking a little trip down to LA. So she did. So these three women and Bobby went down there, and they were checking out an old friend of his commune, a guy that you guys might be familiar with, Bible Charlie Melton, aka Blackbeard.
There it is.
Yep. And
because his little Paul, him being friends with little Paul is very interesting. Another fold in the
Paul brings that up in his book. He says that Bible Charlie knew Beausoleil when Beausoleil was like 15 years old. So I don't know how they ended up meeting, but somehow these crews found themselves together where I guess Charlie and some of the girls were at the Spiral Staircase house, and they were throwing some kind of party one night where they set up some kind of light show. And so Bobby, hanging out in the area, keeping an ear open of what was going on, said, hey, why don't we go check this out?
Absolutely.
So when he did, Charlie's there playing his guitar, had never met him before. He really dug him. They dug each other, both musicians, right? And just kicked it off. So you guys probably know shortly after that, they tried to form a band together called the Milky Way, and they played one gig called at the Topanga Corral.
Yeah, much is made of the reception or lack thereof, and everyone likes to get their Charlie Manson dig in. Like, that short little bastard came in here, we threw him out, even though he's probably, some of these stories he was already in prison or a million miles away. But it's funny, everyone has to say something mean about Charlie. But I keep throwing this thing out there with their meeting, because this was much later than Van Houten, Gypsy, and all these people. Because anytime Charlie makes any movement, no dig on our friend Deb, she said things even on here like, well, Charlie was on the move and they were recruiting new family members. And any survivor that I've spoken to has told me clearly, we never, specifically Charlie, never recruited family members ever. And you think about this organic thing, right? He's here with a couple chicks. They're running around. They got space in the van. I did this shit plenty of times, and it was not as generous of a time. But you got this absolute stunning fox whose life is folding up. Her face looks a little distressed. Beautiful. I got room for a Leslie Van Houten in my van, bro.
Beautiful girl.
dude, eat some crackers in bed. Like, feel free. A couple crumbs. These sheets they'll recover.
Mm.
So that was a very natural thing. That wasn't Charles Manson recruiting foundational members of his murderous cult bloodthirstily. It was a very natural thing of the time with these very spontaneous, magnetized, charismatic young people. Look at each of these characters. Again, this is why I slow down when I read. Run down each of these characters as we're saying this now. Leslie, Gypsy, Bobby, who are hanging with Kenneth Anger. Like, what? Just the history of these people later. But you think about their energy as young people, the kind of electricity they were throwing off, and how it would be received individually, and then just the group thing between them. And everyone has to turn it into sex then.
And then,
boy, I bet they were fucking a lot. Can you imagine what Leslie Van Helton's genitals look like in relation to, you know what I mean? Like, people they always have to do that. But I think when I was young, sure, I had sex with people, whatever, but I got so turned on by that energy, by these dudes even, where you're just fucking can't get enough. You want to stay up all night talking. People think you're on drugs because you're just keyed on the energy. And then they show up at this light show. So they're all popping and excited. And then here's Charlie, who's settled in. What does a light show mean at that time, right? That's a big fucking deal. That means you're having an experience. That means the weed is not going to waste. That means people should bring more weed because this is going to be like a thing. It's a happening, baby. And then he shows up with all his talent, which people, how much percentage-wise do you feel they were at? Do you feel he was a lot
Bobby
above
was
him?
Probably a lot more talented than Charlie, I would say.
People say like 70% more. Okay, because well, his music reflects it. I can't believe how accomplished.
But I think they had
now.
a mutual respect for each other,
right? Like
both in
again,
the
energy,
the ladies department, but also the music department as well.
Well, these two groups came together because who was in Charlie's group at this point? Can you recall off the top of your head?
Yeah, so you had Mary, you had Lynette.
Wow.
You had Ella Jo Bailey,
who was wonderful, bubbly,
eventually bounced with her boyfriend.
She just they killed Hidman, and she was like, can't kick it.
So so around this, this is a little bit hazy, but they were living in this commune down there with Bible Charlie.
Cool.
And eventually, Charlie and the girls found their way up higher into Topanga Canyon, a couple houses. Then they made it to Spawn Ranch. Well,
that was our girl Susan Atkins.
So Charlie and Gail were going back to San Francisco because remember they were a couple, right? And so they said, Gypsy, you and Leslie go to Charlie at the ranch. So when they showed up at the ranch without Bobby, Charlie was like hands off, like no, you're Bobby's girls. Like,
because that got said a lot about Leslie, and I don't know how true that is. I'd be more than happy to hear someone who was there tell us. But that's what was said, was like, hey, Leslie, you're Bobby's girl. And that's prison code again. We get down to
hands
the
off, right?
Philosophy of Charlie, okay? Same with bikers, same with all this. It's not racist to stick with your own kind. It's prison survival. It's business on the street. When you're in the underworld, stick with your own. There's business rules relating to dealing with other races, and you observe those rules or you get served up, okay? Women, hands off until further notice. Somebody else's lady, you don't touch them. You protect them. Hey, you do everything you can afford to do to protect them. The dude shows back up. I did this, and this. You settle up. If it's a bunch of bread, like, hey, man, thanks for getting her clap taken care of it there at the clinic. You know what I mean? Whatever. The men settle up and you're good, because it's not that women are chattel. Men cared for women. And if you were in a relationship with a man, you cared for them. And is that why Bobby peeled off with Gail, and it's Gail who had his first child. Is that correct?
So this is probably a good time for us to wrap this one up. But next episode we'll come back and we'll talk about Bobby going back to San Francisco.
Okay.
A little bit of
it's
his time with
Gail, who he eventually did have a child with.
Exactly.
I just want to put that marker in. That does clearly happen later, but to buttress this all together, so much going on with Bobby. So we were just gonna check in with some Bob here today, and look at us go on a multi-episodic adventure. What I want to do now, thank our friends, thank our sponsors, and for you, our loving subscribers and supporters. If you're watching this, you didn't spend a goddamn nickel. Hit the fucking like, bro. We're getting less than half the likes. Like, fuck is that, dude? We got analytics to worry about. There's no money in this bitch. But, we're trying to build the thing up where we can get the subjects you want us to interview here, because they're going to have travel expenses and different things. It's not about making a living or wanting to make some money off of Manson. It's about bringing you the people you want to talk about. Keep that lively in the contents. I reckon we're coming back on Bobby, man. This is great.
And then
I'm
after
really
we're
excited.
done with Bobby, you guys go ahead and leave it in the comments, right? Let us know some of the things
after we're
you want us
done
to
with
talk about.
Bobby. We're going to be done with Bobby. No, Bobby, we're never going to be done with you because you're a very exciting individual. Really glad to hear you're up for parole. I'm hoping that you get the compassionate release. We hope to eventually have some sort of communication with you. I don't know what the hell's going on with this website. If anyone's clear on that, I want one of those paintings, bro. Not selfishly speaking.
Not the digital. You want the
I want a physical canvas out of respect for Bob. I want something his hands touched just for historic purposes as part of the collection. It's not my collection. I'm merely a caretaker of the objects I currently have. They're not mine, dude. Like, I can't own them. Thank you again for every word of kindness, Twilighters. Cannot express it enough. We're going to come back part deuce next week. Thank you, producer Alex. Red Onion, our friends over at California Historical Design, Mr. Gus Bostrom, friend of the program. We love you all. You know what gets me hotter than a double ARP discount? That's right. When you like and subscribe, babe. And that's the way it was on Twilight Garage. In the year our Lord, 2025.